Hi, everyone. I have a very, very special guest on the podcast with me today. Um, this person has completely kicked off the reason why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place and gave me so much insight on why I do the things that I do, why certain things had been repeating pattern wise in my life. And we have just grown into a great friendship since then. So this is Reggie Mckiver, and he is a transformational coach. I feel I could take a whole nother podcast to introduce all of the things that he does, but I would say the highest on the list is just his ability to really transform people's lives in a one-on-one format. And now he also has Academy 333, which you can get an insight from him in more of a group setting. And I will allow him and have him share some of that information with you. But today I wanted to talk about patterns, and the conversation may go in a variety of different directions, as Reggie and I's conversations often do. But they are usually always filled with gold nuggets and gems of information. So I am going to let you, Reggie, explain and talk a little bit about your story. And we're so excited to have you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. It's good. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a long time, but it's good to talk to you. Yeah.
I know. Time flies.
Yeah. But you look great. Yeah. All right. But my story, it's just like everyone else. You know, I'm 9 to 5. I was a lieutenant at the police department and a SWAT team member. There was a part of me that always wanted to be an entrepreneur because I felt like there was just greatness inside of me. And I knew that it had to come out, but I didn't actually know the way that it would come out. So, make a long story short, I opened up a retail store where I was like the town herbalist and metaphysicist. And I began to run that store to over $100,000 profit in the first year by learning how to look within. And looking within has caused so many transitions in my life, but it brought me through marriage. It brought me through a shift to move to California. It brought me through facing my worst fears, and it really made life interesting. The gift of looking within, and even more so, the look of being present no matter where you are, it changed my life, Carrie, forever. And it's like if I would have known when I was a little kid that if I could just look within, fix within, and stay within, and the outside world would reflect that, oh, it would have been game on. But I made it game on since I found out, though. That's the thing about it. But that's my background.
I absolutely love that. I just love that. I got goosebumps.
Yeah. And that led me to what I do today. I had to take some steps that the average person might have a problem taking. I had to give up everything that I knew for what I didn't know. But I know the inside works like this. It's faith-based. Unless you believe in something that you can't see, and yes, it should frighten you a little bit, life is not worth living. And that inside world is always going to respond to what's creeping back there in that subconscious mind, to what is it that you really want to do.
I just love that. I say that all the time about faith. It's really, truly believing in things that you can't see. And since I am such a fact person, which you know, and I like to see the numbers, I want to really calculate, everything that could possibly happen and control every outcome. Realizing that that's not possible and staying present has been so impactful. So will you share a story? Like, did you have an aha moment? Because I know that I had one, and it was in one of our conversations, but did you have a certain moment where the light bulb just went off?
Yes. I had a moment, and it was so real that I thought I was going to die because it was like I figured out life. It was like I figured out that in life, you go on a long journey away from yourself. You start out with this gift, and then you have to go through all of these things. And you eventually have to find your way back to the gift with the experience. And when I found it, it was like, okay, life is happening. Life is happening. Now, everything that I wanted, that I couldn't get before, it started coming. And it was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. That I understood the rule, the principle, know thyself. And when I began to know myself, everything in this life began to make sense. And that day I was riding down the street in California, and I was so happy. The air felt different. Life felt different. Everything felt different. And immediately I said, well, am I about to die? Because I figured out this thing. But little did I know that aha moment was leading to some bigger aha moments.
So how did you figure it out? Like you said that you had this moment, you're like, things felt different. And I feel the same way. It was almost, I don't know how to describe it. When I started realizing that I was so much more in control and so much more able to let go and allow things to happen. I almost felt like for so much time, it was just white knuckling things, a lot of resistance, not looking at certain doors, being convinced of one. And once I know for me, I started often saying the prayer that, these are my hopes and dreams, and let God's will, hopefully be my will, but I am okay with any outcome because I know that all of these things will be for me. I almost felt like things were like in HD. It's like I started appreciating little things that I would have walked right by that I wouldn't have noticed in the past. So do you remember kind of what was right before that happened that you'd want to share?
Well, I'll say it like this. It was the truth that set me free. You remember when it was written that a child shall lead them? What dawned on me is that everything that I believed was based off of what I saw as a child. And I was a grown man being led by the perceptions that I picked up as a child. People, they don't know how true that statement is, a child shall lead them, because most of us are being led by a child and getting the experiences in life that child created the belief systems for. When I found that out about myself, that I had a problem with love, and that whenever I reach love in a relationship, I will begin to self-sabotage it. Oh man, it dawned on me why I had a problem with love in the first place. And that love was one thing that was said to me that really crushed me as a little child. And I went back to my bedroom and I said, I'll never love anyone like this again. And it tore me up. But here's one of the powers. I sat with an emotion until it became law. And when I sat with that emotion, when my mother came back from the hospital, which it was a long story, but we were separated for the first time ever. And I was told that she was going to die. She wasn't never coming back home. And I was told to get out of this person's face. I went back to that bedroom and I said, love is bad. I'll never love because it hurts too bad. She came home from the hospital and there was a wall up. But I did not know that that wall had a mind of its own. And anytime I reached love or happiness in finances or in relationship, I begin to self-sabotage. And now you see what these aha moments is that everyone has a self-sabotage pattern that brings them back to their belief. So if you would have gave me a great relationship, I wasn't programmed for that. So it went against what I believed set as a child. So I would go messing it up by any means necessary, arguing, doing whatever, because the root cause is that I shielded myself from love. I programmed the subconscious mind, then it itself began to keep me safe. So happiness, I couldn't reach it in nothing. And that was like when that day came that I realized this, and we talk about that energetic cord cutting where you have to separate from the beliefs in the spiritual and establish new patterns in the natural. When I did that, it was like life never was the same again. And that is like the most joyous thing in this universe to me, is that when you figure out what is the core of why things are happening like they're happening in your life and can change them, that is amazing.
Oh,
Uh,
I love that story for so many reasons. I can relate on so many levels because
yeah,
I, in a very similar childhood experience, went through some difficult times with my mom. And it's so interesting because I read this article that was saying that the human brain can only take in, a certain amount of an environment, a situation,
yes,
and you will filter in what you've been programmed to see. So
yes,
it's interesting, especially children, fight, flight, or freeze. Children are going to put up any kind of wall and think that this is like a protective mechanism.
yeah,
This will keep me safe, but it doesn't do its job and serve the purpose because it actually keeps us void of so many things that make us joyful and experience like really pure joy. So I think
yeah,
it's crazy because I say that all the time. Once I kind of came about to, okay, we're all programmed differently. And this was my aha moment on our conversation on a coaching call, because I very distinctly remember going off into one of like my care events. And I'm like, Reggie, anyone would be upset by this. And
uh-huh,
you said to me, no, that's not necessarily true, but there's a reason you are upset by this. And that was completely my moment where I realized that there are people that could be faced with the same situation and it may not chap them in a certain
uh-huh,
way. And usually, whenever you hit any of those little speed bumps, shall we say,
yeah,
if you don't pretend that they didn't happen, or you don't just write it off as anyone would feel this way, or I don't want to look any further into it, you can really find so much about your programming, and then
yeah,
you can catch yourself using it in the future. And I almost think of relationships and connections and anything, even in business, kind of like an outlet, right? Because so many
yeah,
times, like, we just won't plug in because there's all of these things that we were feeling from the past. And as soon as you start getting closer and closer to a person, a goal, it very realistically happens where we kind of like freak out, and it's typically from some type of past programming or experience where the outcome didn't go the way that we wanted, but we unfortunately associated it with the wrong storyline. So we all have
yeah,
loss and whatnot, but the storyline isn't like don't love anyone. The storyline isn't don't pursue your dreams. But really, when you're a young person, you don't have any other tool to kind of get
exactly,
around that. And so we do kind of get
exactly.
stuck, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And what you said about the protection, the triggers, one thing that recently we've been doing is helping people release weight off of the body without any exercise, without any diet change. The weight on the body is a protection, a mechanism of protection. So I go all the way back into childhood, just like I did with my mind. I went back with my body. I was, as of Friday, I was 60 pounds heavier than I was since April. And weight started falling off of the body. And I said, well, it's not sugar because I gave up sugar before. But what it was is that when I found my truth, something said, now go back and do it from the weight. Now, if weight is a protection mechanism, and I think this is going to change the game, we fight with it. We drop pounds and then we fight and keep from getting, but well, that's not harmony. The average person, their mind is in one direction, their heart is in another direction, and their body is in another. They're not in alignment. So the body knows the truth. The heart knows the truth. The mind is the only thing that we keep telling ourselves that something is different than what we see. When I went back to that protection mechanism in my life, I saw that I was protected. I went all the way back to a picture I had posted where I was hiding behind the teacher. I was hiding behind the teacher because I felt irrelevant and that I didn't matter. So that hiding pattern, my weight picked up, and my weight was protecting me from the fears of the world. So no matter what I did, if I dropped 20 pounds, I gained 30 back. No matter what I did, I was in a battle. When I found out and reset it, the weight began to stay off and got back
Hmm.
down to the weight I was in the military. So when
Yeah.
the protection mechanisms and all these things that we have in life, the belief systems, when we find the root cause of these things, it changes. Aggravation, the teachers in our life. I remember when you told me that, I said, okay, it aggravated her. But the people that aggravate you the most in life are the most important people in your reality. Because people that aggravate will always point you to your truth.
Yes.
You see, we get mad, we get out, we go on to the next person. We get out of a bad business deal, we go to the next person. It's a bad business deal again. We're having the same experiences with different people, but no one ever tells us that these teachers that are aggravating you are the only things that's relevant. What do you think?
I mean, I cannot shake my head enough about that, because without any aggravation or any of the negative emotions, we can't find the root of some of the programming that may not help us find our truth. And with the weight, so I'm completely on the same page. And obviously, a lot of my nutrition coaching, it's scientific based. But here at the end of the day, let's be serious. If you are struggling to avoid any of these situations, a big coping mechanism, and why I really have been working to dive deeper with my clients when it comes to diet about these things, uh, a big thing is eating.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a variety of other things, right? Any type of substance abuse, but food is one of those substances that we cannot just say, okay, I know that I'm going through a hard time, so I'm not going to eat. That's
Yeah.
not one that you write off. Like, it's a part of your reality and it's going to be. And I do think that through food is a way that whenever we're feeling certain ways, we can almost punish ourselves. We can get really hard on ourselves. Instead of, like you're saying, being in harmony. And just a big thing for me was just relaxing into the fact that
Exactly.
and you can do that when you're in the present, right? When you cannot relax when you're constantly thinking about the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. We're people, we're all humans, we're having a human experience. We have certain things in place that they're not going to let us consume all of that information and not feel some type of anxiety or
Exactly.
overwhelm. But if you stay present and you work through the things as they come and you don't freak out, right? We'll all get sad. I think a lot of people, if they feel sad, there's some type of concern that it's going to get worse and worse and worse until we die. Or I don't even know, because sometimes I've even done different strategies with clients. Well, and I know that you and I have done this together. Well, if that happened, then what? If that happened, then what? If that happened, then what? And half the time, nobody really has an answer. Like, they're just afraid of the unknown. So sometimes
Exactly.
if we can just calm down and stay in the present with things, including our diet, I say all the time, you can learn so much about what someone's feeling and how they are with their relationship with food and how they eat. You do find
Yeah.
this peace where you're really listening to more of your hunger cues and you just feel a lot more in charge.
Yeah. Yeah. And a part of this, I'm going to talk to you after this because we got some catching up to do. But I
Yeah.
found out, I put a whole system together, Karen. I was a reinforcement eating. And the inner God, the same thing told me to pay attention to how people eat. I was eating to reinforce. And I had the same eating as if I was building a wall to protect me. So it wasn't even that I was hungry. It represent reinforcement. Stay safe, stay
Mm-hmm.
protected, stay guarded. And every person at the dinner table eats in a pattern that describes their subconscious state of being. And that thing
Exactly.
messed me up. Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
And even their food choices. A big thing was for me, the realization of the things that I would be craving or wanting had so much less to do with actually wanting it or actually being hungry, and so much more
Yeah.
to do with I'm sad. This is what I would eat then. And with food, we're not bashing. Just to be clear to anyone
Exactly.
listening, we're not bashing this because Reggie and I, we love some delicious snacks, but it's just the realization of, okay, is this serving me? Because as we all know, there's a comfort in being a weight that you are comfortable with. And
Yeah.
there's something to be said for that by living your life. And it's not all about aesthetics and it's not all about how you look. That's, in my opinion, like a great byproduct of being the weight that you would desire. But there's just so many other things. And I love that you brought up, kind of shrinking back, because I've noticed I've been at different mastermind events and different things. And something that I do whenever I'm feeling a little overwhelmed in a room is like kind of like hunch my shoulders forward and like make myself
Yeah.
smaller, because I'm like, what if somebody notices me and they don't
Yes.
like me? And over
Yeah.
time, I've come to the conclusion, hey, I'm probably never going to completely eradicate some of those senses that would come into play, but welcoming them in and just saying, okay, like this is why I'm feeling this way, kind of reset, regroup, and like move forward. It's really helped me not do what I used to do, which was I'm not going, right?
Yeah.
I won't go
Yeah.
there. So it's pretty cool because it ends up opening all of these doors once we start. Okay, so things kind of circling back, things start triggering us. Our food relationship is whatever it may be. There's people in our, close proximity that are bringing up a whole bunch of different feelings. And as you lean into these things and come with some conclusions, you realize so much about yourself. And then you can think about where it came from. And then when you're presented with it again, you almost, without thinking too much about it in real time, you're like, oh, I know where this is coming
Yeah.
from. And I
Exactly.
can calm myself down and I can move forward with it, because I've done the same thing. I know for me in relationships, it's really tricky because being hurt in the past or feeling a little bit vulnerable, that's usually not the best feeling when you're younger. And there's a lot of cases that would make us not want to feel that way again. So it's very easy to irrationally react to something
Yeah.
that somebody's doing or not doing, right? They're just like basically existing. And now it's
Exactly.
been great because I can take a minute and think, is this about this other person or is this really about me?
Yeah.
And when you do that, then you don't really have to dive into the conversation with somebody else, because you can basically go through the whole thing in your mind that, oh my gosh, I'm only being triggered right now because I am feeling scared, feeling insecure, feeling this. Where did that come from? Why do I feel that way? Do I have a reason to bring this to the table? And if you're going to end up forging better relationships because you're going to be putting out that kind of vibe that's going to attract somebody else who wants to do the same things. Um,
Exactly.
which is, it really is the case. I mean, I think we had a conversation about like attracts like, even though the whole age old adage is opposites attract, and they may, but I mean, over time, you do find that it's like birds of a feather and like attracts like. I
Exactly.
think you told me, and you can tell it on this, the story about the courtyard in the school or outside of a school. Do you remember?
What story
Like you
was
were
that?
saying
That's
that
so
there was
many.
people like kind of together, and even like some disease processes, they would find that people would be in the same group just
Yeah.
because we were saying that they
Yeah.
kind of attracted and sort of pulled near each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Um,
Whenever we did those classes in the past, it was interesting that, the thing I did about reading the nails, but when you find out that everyone that had like anger or anger problems that was in the liver, they would all migrate and end up around each other. And the ones that were trauma, whatever trauma that they had, they always found themselves. And like you said, opposites attract. I, I'm like you. I say on that, it's not opposites that attract, it's opposites that tell you the truth about who you are. And when you find out who you are, you attract people that are like you. You see? So opposites fix. When you get knowledge of self, you begin to realize that you are the center of everything, and everything in your life represents you. If you have love, you're going to draw love. If you don't have love, you're going to draw the opposite. But yes, if it was trauma kids, when I ran a boot camp, if I went somewhere with my group of kids, even though I had kids that had already graduated, if we were in a big field with all of the kids from all over, they would always navigate towards the kids that were in my program before that had trauma and didn't even know it. You see? And we are attracted to it. Uh huh.
yeah, I believe that so much. So with that, I mean, when you think about this, everybody, I honestly believe it's a secret to life, right?
Yeah.
Because, and you have to remember that so many people have not done any of this work. So a lot of times their behavior toward you, it likely has nothing to do with you either. It has to do with their own patterns and programming and things, because I see it all the time where people just feel so unfairly mistreated by other individuals. But when you learn this, I guess we could say method or way of thinking, you start feeling such crazy compassion for other human beings. And there's
Yeah.
nothing more beautiful than feeling compassion. And then from there, you're just feeling gratitude. And that's going to open the door for so much joy, because you're not going to think that everyone's coming from this horrible, malicious place. You're going to understand, like, oh my gosh, this is so much like what they were taught or something. It's more what happened to you, not why are you
Exactly.
like that? It's like what happened. And the people that want to figure out what happened and where this came from. And you were talking about trauma kids, but this could be things that other people, like, it may not be the definition of traumatic, right? Because I
Uh-huh.
also have had clients that have been like, no, like I had this great childhood, everything's been perfect, the end. But then it's like, okay, let's dive a little bit further into like your personality. Like, how would you describe yourself? Your parents' personalities, how would you describe them? And a lot of times when you start trying to recall certain things, you can pick up on why you would view things the way that you would view things. And I know for a while that was, I'd been looking for something like that for so long.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
how has doing this, I know that you were talking about, so one pet peeve I have about spirituality and the whole realm of this conversation, I would say,
Uh-huh.
is that if you figure this out about yourself, like a bag of money is going to drop in your lap, and like Prince Charming's going to come riding in, or Princess Charming is going to come riding in, and like the end, happily ever after. And I want to kind of touch on that because I think it's important for people to know that you will still be living the human experience. And I
Yeah.
know that you and I are both Christian. And so we do believe that, I mean, if you weren't, then this would be heaven on earth. So you are a human being. There's going to be things that are going to go on. And like we were just suggesting, there's other people in your close proximity that are working through their things. And so there's no way to be completely devoid of anything that could cause anger, sadness, pain, suffering, all of those things. But describe a little bit about that and how you feel as though things have changed for you in the positive since you've been aware of this.
Yeah. Well, we talk about universal law. We talk about like the polarity. Like when you said you sat there and your shoulders were hunched up and you didn't want to be noticed and you had that energy that went with it. Well, let's look at law of polarity. Let's look at that whatever you truthfully are, you're always connected in it to it on one end of the spectrum. So automatically, if you told me you went in an environment like that, I know that's another law of cause and effect because something happened over here, it has you like that. But it also tells me your gift. So when you're like this, it's telling me actually that you're supposed to be out like this. But by cause and effect, something happened to put you there. Most people in their mind, they have this driving force that talks to them. Have you ever questioned the voice in your head? The voice in your head, it talks. And you know whether or not it's trauma based or you know whether or not it's life giving. When it's trauma based, you always take offense at something someone said earlier in a conversation and your mind replays it. What did they mean by that? What it always thinks the worst about something. And most people go around all day with that voice inside their head speaking to them over and over and over again. And it's like they have good days, but the good days are always shadowed by being on guard, protecting on what any and everyone is going to say at any given moment. You ever stop yourself and talk to that voice? You ever address that voice and say, well, wait a minute. If I listen to you, what is the end result of what you're saying and where you're taking me? Now, let's talk the silver lining. That voice that's talking to you is pointing you toward it. It's the voice of the belief system that you created. it will always rob from you in the ending because you'll be right. You'll have your attitude. You'll be right, but you'll be wrong. That voice is everything. When you learn how to address that voice and conquer it, I have active conversations with myself. When I hear it saying something, when you're in trauma, you want to defend trauma. When you want to be free and you do this work, you want to search yourself first. When I search myself, I'm like, wait a minute, this situation happened right here. Now I'm actively sabotaging it. I got to change what I say. When you do these things, Carrie, people say this golden light, this thing at the end of the tunnel. When you find your inner, everything else will reflect it based off of your gift. And if you can take your trauma, tie it back to your gift, what's for you in this life will come to you. I think so many people lose hope because they say, yeah, it's going to rain. Yeah, it's going to rain. It's going to do all that because of seasons and law of rhythm. But your due reward in this life will come to you because if a person finds themselves, it is their job to establish an inheritance for their children's children, their generation. Many of us, like me and you, in some kind of way, we're black sheeps, but we don't think like everybody else. We don't talk like everyone else. When we find our rhythm, we are the ones that will change everything that comes behind us because the bloodline has already suffered enough. When a person finds themselves, they will find their inheritance. And it may not be this gold and this bling around the neck, but it will be a daughter or a son that knows how to be in a healthy relationship. It will be a person that knows how to manifest. So that's my answer to your question.
Oh my gosh, so much goodness. And I think that is so true. So when it comes to the voice in your head, it's funny that you bring that up because I will have moments where I will hear something and the old me would probably call a friend and kind of like reinforce the voice by talking about it, like talking about the possibility of this demise of whatever, my inner dialogue has come about. But now when I hear it, the idea of even saying it out loud is ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
And of course, I'll still voice some minor concerns that are day to day, but the large ones, like, that they will actually be ridiculous to me. And so less of the time that voice is running the roost, like ruling the roost. And the more life-giving information is what I default to. But that took, I don't even know how long to come to, because usually it's all the opposite. And like you said, people will completely go through their day. Or even when they have a very joyous experience, people are almost scared to be joyous. Like if I'm too joyous, then I'm going to be struck down. And it doesn't work that way. I love that you said, of course, there's like universal law and everything's in season and there's rhythms for everything. But we so often decide our own cause and effect. And we will decide that like, if I'm too happy, something's going to have to happen right in this moment. And it just doesn't work that way. Am I so smart? Oh my gosh.
I love you. You're so
smart.
Thank
you. I try. I learn from the best. But we do that, right? It's just, and we don't even think that that's odd. How you said people go their whole life and it doesn't even dawn on them, gee, this is pretty weird that I'm not letting myself be joyous. Or gosh, this is odd that I've convinced myself that I had one soulmate and that relationship didn't work out. And now I'm destined to be alone forever. People say these things all the time and it's wild, right?
See, but think about it. Religion doesn't make it any better because they condition us for storm after storm after storm. But what they don't explain is examples of law of polarity. If you did your time in struggling, if you did your time in bad relationship, if you did your time in junk, it's only right that you got another season coming. And I use this when people say, well, you got to come to the church this weekend. You're going to cry about this. You're going to get delivered from this. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'll use their own example on them. I said, Job went through a period of time in his life when he suffered. He lost his family. He lost everything. He lost his finances. And at last, he lost his health. Whenever he went back and realized the beginning of where everything began to happen. Everything in his life began to be released, and he began to gain double for what he'd been through. But they never had a part 2 of the book saying that he suffered again. I think that every man has a hell state and they have a paradise state. But most people stay in hell because no one tells them that their entire life can change. And we have to start, and I always go to universal law because everything was written from that. If you have a bad, there has to be a good. Now I can take universal law and I can create from that. I can create literature from that. I can create my truth from that. But we have to start expecting things to change in life. And that,
Yes. No, I just love that you said expecting it to go the other way, because I just said that, my aunt was not feeling well. And I would say, hey, it's okay to, ask questions and want to know the status, but expect it to go right. And I say that all the time to people, just expect it to be what you want. And then while you're doing that, don't repeat your same patterns. So when you're talking about relationships or finances and things like that, I know for me in relationships, if I look back at my relationships, there were a lot of times that I was foregoing certain things that are very important to me that ended up coming to the surface later. But if you are willing to, these are tough conversations, right? Like you may have to say that, hey, this relationship would be better suited on my end in this status. Or, and I truly believe that there are a lot of people that, yes, work things out if you can work them out. But I think that a lot of relationships, we see so many poor relationships, intimate relationships in this regard I'm speaking of, but even friendships. But I think intimate relationships, especially, it's kind of like, if you let the relationship go, you're a quitter. Like society really looks down on ended relationships. Like every song is like so distressing about a breakup and how horrible it is. And the same thing with about end of life, right? So we have these certain things that are like, these things mean this. But what happens if you didn't look at it that way? Because you can make the decision. And what if it happens that you realize, hey, this is better suited for me? And if it's better suited for you, everyone listening, it's better suited for the other person too, right? Because a true like match, one person isn't going to be like, this isn't really that great for me. And the other person's going to be like, this is my dream. It's going to be two people being like, this works, right? It's going to be like two hell yeses, not one maybe and one. So you don't have to worry about hurting somebody else's feelings because their other person, like you're almost blocking them from their like true fate of who they're supposed to find. But if you do actually consider how you feel and you're real and you live in your truth and you explain that and you have those conversations with somebody else, I think it serves both parties. And I think less people are doing that because of the whole, this is how you're supposed to consider these things. This is how you're supposed to feel. This is what this is supposed to mean. And I do love seeing so many cool modern families now because I think that we are kind of overturning some of that. Like, hey, maybe this is how it went, but we can all get along, or this relationship could be whichever way. I know that there's so much about, can you be friends, or, with co-parenting, can you be friends with an ex, or what does that look like? And I think once you get to that point where you can be really mature about situations and you can understand that things happen for you, it's less about the other person, more about the experience. And you can kind of just be at peace with letting something change.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How can you choose them if you didn't even choose you? How you see, if we don't know who we are, how can we choose that right person? See, what happens is we end up marrying teachers and you'll keep marrying teachers until we wake up. Mm-hmm. If we choose, it all centers around from us. And what happens is, this is the relationship patterns. These are these things. We hurry up and we get into something. And we go with all of our love. We go with all of our emotions. But from that time, we've already started breaking up the fabric of that relationship. Now, when a person comes in, there's a honeymoon, everything is good until they say things that are connected to our triggers. When they say things that's connected to our triggers, we have these arguments, we have these blow-ups. But at that time, and this is the sad truth about working with a lot of people, as you know, they may be in a marriage that they were never meant to be in. And now they're trying to hold to something even though they're changing. One thing I found out and others find out is that when you wake up, the marriage that you're in may not be yours and it may be over when you wake up and there's nothing you can do about it. What happens is a lot of people, instead of go against what society says, they stick with it and they begin to die. Well, some of us, we're like, we've got one shot at life. And if I learn the lessons that I need to learn, then it opens you up to truly love instead of repeating the same patterns over and over again. A person who doesn't know themselves, how can they choose the right person? All they choose is teachers.
That is so powerful. That is, you really do. All you will choose, because you'll feel this connection, right? Even to somebody who's triggering you. Because there's like little glimpses, you want to go toward that and figure it out innately. You want to figure it out, but you will realize that, oh my gosh, there were so many parts of myself that I had no idea existed until I've gone through this growth. And that's not to say that this other person did or didn't do anything to make it work. It's really more about you come all the way through to the other side of this awakening and you realize that, okay, I suppose that there could be a chance that you could mend something like this if you really had great open communication and you both were able to verbalize your needs and wants, and you could find some way of it reciprocating. But I think it's interesting that you say, how are you going to be able to find somebody if you don't know who you are? I have now said that over and over and over again about how do you explain what you want or need? Because now I think that the best thing to do in any conflict resolution, friends, I bet you this would work in business as long as you're not getting a little bit too maybe emotional about the situation, because that would be something that you should remove some of that from. But you can think about it. You can say exactly the action or exactly the statement or whatnot that made you feel a certain way, how it made you feel, and what you would have preferred to see happen instead. And so most people don't even know. They're like, this upset me. I don't know how I feel. I know I don't feel good. I don't know if I'm sad. I don't know if I'm angry. I don't know if I'm frustrated. I don't know what emotion is tied to this. I just know it does not feel joyous. And then they don't even know what would make them feel better, right? Because if they don't know what would make them feel better, it's not what the other person did. It's something going on in you. And so if you can't even explain what the need is, then you're kind of stuck there. You're going to have to figure that part out before you go to this other person. So if you have a relationship where both parties can do that for each other, it could be really, really cool. Maybe you can salvage it. But if you're on a totally different spot and this other person that feels more awakened is really, really dying to connect, it can lead to like the repetitive arguments about the same things.
Yeah, when we have those moments as kids, we all form a question. If you're in a marriage and you're trying to answer the question, am I good enough? Because you never felt good enough with the parent. Every day in that marriage, you're going to be saying, am I good enough? So anything that happens is going to challenge that am I good enough syndrome. So if it's an argument, if something can be misconstrued, something can be stated, that is a void. Because the question has not been answered, the partner will never make it better. Because every time they fix one area, a void
another
is just
one
a
comes
void.
up.
Exactly. You see?
Yeah, and I love that, because that also, that's making me think of past situations where there have been times that you'll have a conversation with somebody and those people like won't accept your statement as their truth, right?
Nope.
And that's inner too, because it'll be confusing for the other party, right? Because you'll say, that's not what I meant at all. This is what I was trying to tell you. But like you said, if you're not diving into those patterns, or at least at those thought patterns and those beliefs and really challenging those, you will change, you will literally change intent from other people
Yeah.
to support your belief about what that
Yeah.
looks like. So like using the example that you brought up, that I'm not good enough. Somebody could say, hey, your report at work was overdue. Could you please submit it to me ASAP? And they could say, you said that I'm horrible at my job. And you're
Exactly.
like, this conversation was totally just about dates. But when it triggers that, you can realize, like, oh my goodness, like I
Exactly.
am telling a story that I'm not good enough. Or if I make a mistake, I don't give myself grace because I don't feel I deserve it, which is all this internal conversation. And when you get to the bottom of some of these things, guys, like even if you get to the bottom of one plot line, right? Because a lot of us are a lot more complicated than a single plot line. When you get to the bottom of one, you're going to be able to see yourself doing these things with a variety of different plot lines. And then it
Yeah.
really will be helpful. Like the teachers usually attract, and it's so helpful to kind of think of the people who are really getting at you and decide
Yeah.
why, right? Because I feel like, closing this off, I love giving action items to people. I'm such a doer. So whenever we would have our calls, I loved when you would give me something to do. And so I want to give everybody something to do. You can make a list of some of the people that you do feel are triggers for you. And you can
Uh-huh.
write the things that have upset you. And if you can get far enough to decide how it's making you feel, then you can probably go back on your own and think about, is there a time in your life that this has happened before? And I know that when you and I did this, I was only kind of staying in my adult life, right? And I know that it's going to be a little bit hard for people, or they're going to think it sounds probably a little cliche or cheesy to be like, go all the way back. And they're going to try and maybe think of the examples that we gave. Like, was there a time in the classroom that I stood behind a teacher? So
Uh-huh.
you may not come up with it right away. And I know that I was so impatient and frustrated with some of the moments. I'm like, nope, nothing. Flat,
Uh-huh.
flat line, can't think of a thing. And it can get a little bit frustrating when you're trying to do this. But if you just sit with it and you just reflect, and if you're not even sure, maybe then you can think of going forward, right? If I get irritated, I'm going to write down what happened and then see if you can go back and find the pattern. Because if there's a situation that now has come to the forefront of your mind, you can go back and see if you can find the pattern. And then you can keep trying to go back until you see it. Maybe it's
Uh-huh.
relationship, maybe it's friendships, those kinds of things. And you can really find where you may have been your own worst enemy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I always tell a person, take, if that person aggravates you, write down how they make you feel. Did it make you feel not good enough? Did it make you feel rejected? Did it make you feel? And then when you see these words are always going to tie you to your gift. When you see that rejected, you know that your true gift is acceptance. When you see not being good enough, then you know you're more than a conqueror. When you write down the words that show up using law of polarity, switch them to the opposite, and they will point you to your truth. Everything points you to your truth. When you wake up, you spend time. One of the biggest power that I've ever seen was the power to be present. And when you're present, you have to listen to what these organ structures, what this weight has been trying to tell you all along. When you become present, if you look at any business, when you get these things figured out, like Karen was saying, when you become present, just look at people. The best at whatever they do have the power to be present. Everyone that's distracted, everyone that has their mind on so many things they can't focus, they suffer. When you
Mm-hmm.
know your truth, you fully can show up present, and anything that you put emotion on will come to pass, because emotion is the power vessel of faith. Faith is supposed to attach to emotion to bring it to pass. We attach worry to faith, and we keep getting the same results. Use people to heal yourself. Use people to let you know right where you at, And whether it's marriage or whether it's anything, the day you wake up, you don't have to leave a job. You don't have to leave a marriage, because the day you wake up, they'll cut you off. And there's nothing you can do about it, because
Oh
they're
my
not your
gosh.
reality.
It's so funny because isn't that the truth too? Oftentimes that I always say this quote. I don't even know where I saw it originally, but it's amazing how fast the universe will move once you decide. So when
Yeah.
you decide
Yeah.
that something's for you, I mean, that first step is a game changer.
Yeah.
And then you have to be aware that it may not show up in the package that you thought, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be open to it may not look like exactly what I thought it was going to look like. I'm going to explore and see what's out there. And then you start finding just the fun in the journey. One of the
Yeah.
things that I saw about being present before we end this, because some people say, well, how do you be present? What can you do to be present? It is normal for us to think ahead, right? And move into future thinking. But I saw in this book, you can do something rather quickly where you just put your feet on the ground and you see like three colors around you and you notice certain things about your environment that you're in right at that moment. It can kind of cue you back to sitting where you're at right then. Because often, then from there, you start getting in the habit of, okay, some of these things that I'm thinking about, they are not happening at this moment. That's not to say that you shouldn't prepare for things, and just be all YOLO all the time, but it is to say that worry isn't going to change those things. And when you can focus on the
Yes.
present, then you can take action, and action's what's really going to change the trajectory of something, not just worrying and ruminating and that kind of thing. And so when you kind of realize that you can dictate your thoughts and you can change your thought patterns, because I'm here to say that I personally have only had my mind filled with some of the things that we're talking about working through. A lot of times didn't even notice it. And now it feels uncomfortable for me to think that way. But it took a lot of practice and a lot of work and a lot of journaling and a lot of things that were uncomfortable and a lot of just wanting to be like, oh, whatever. Like this would be so much easier for me to just vent all day and lay in bed under the covers. I always say that a lot of times when work gets stressful for me, I have like ostrich syndrome where I just want to like put my head in the sand and like pretend it's not there. But if you start attacking some of those things and really picking them apart over time, it becomes just your response, your new response.
That's
And
true.
there's so much beauty in that, because then you're not living this life feeling uh, so many potential threats and emotionally draining. Like you were saying, like it can be taxing to just constantly worry and be stuck in this cycle. And from there, so many other things fall into place, just how you're taking care of yourself. Um, Self care is eating right and those kinds of things, but it's also paying attention to these things. And it's also paying attention to, opening tough finances and bills that maybe you just want to avoid and pretend they're not there. Like self care is doing all of the stuff that's a little uncomfortable to get to the other side. It's not just the cool stuff and the trips and vacations and things like that. So
Yeah.
I love talking about the programming and the patterns that we get in, because it's true. Like it'll happen over and over again. And I think I've joked with you that eventually you're going to get hit with the universal frying pan, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's
you'll
it.
get these like
That's
little
it.
patterns, little patterns. This is coming, this is coming. But if you're not going to learn the lesson, um, I with 100% certainty can say that the world will make you try and see it, and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder until you listen.
It
Some people
does.
probably go their whole life without listening, but if you do lean into it, then there's so many other things on the side, and you won't fully realize, right, all the things that you've been holding yourself back from with some of these patterns and some of the programming that you have until you explore it further and move through it. So I love this conversation
Yeah.
with you. I feel like we could talk
Yeah.
about this stuff all
All
day,
day.
because it
Uh-huh.
really is it's such a game changer. And I hope that you guys can hear the excitement when Reggie and I and the passion when we talk about these things, because it really has changed our lives. And we're not just saying that as some kind of like, it's life changing, and we don't really mean it. Like we really, really mean it. So
Yeah.
we want you to really think about these things. And Reggie, can you tell everyone like where can they find information about you and where can they find information about Academy 333?
Well, they can go to Academy. academy333.com, academy333.com, and they can find out about this school. The best way to find me, most people, they find me on Facebook, believe it or not. And it's just Reginald, Reginald, McKeever, McKiver, or shoot me an email at Reggie McKeever, McKiver.com.
Oh, I love that. And you guys, you will want to know some information about Reggie's services and what he has going, because I mean, they're truly amazing and definitely have been so helpful. And coaches who are listening to this, trust me, like we all need these resources and we all need to, keep learning and have mentors, because it is challenging to really truly see something that's going on from an unbiased perspective with yourself.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Reggie. I just adore talking to you, and this was amazing.
It's my pleasure. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Till next time, everyone.